The freezing rain hit the back of Robyn Teal's neck like small, deliberate slaps, and the concrete beneath her palms was so cold it burned. She had fallen hard, hip, shoulder, the side of her face, when Grant shoved her out of the passenger door while the BMW was still rolling. She could hear the engine note rise as he accelerated away, and then the wet silence of a November night in Toronto closed around her like a fist. She was in the lane behind the Distillery District, a stretch of old brick and bad lighting that nobody bothered with after the galleries closed. The cobblestones bit through the fabric of her gown, a sapphire blue wrap dress she had commissioned from a seamstress in Kensington Market because she had learned years ago that no off-the-rack gown would ever fit her properly, and she had stopped apologizing for that, even if Grant never had. Her left cheekbone throbbed where his ring had connected. He wore it on his right hand, a heavy architectural signet with his firm's logo pressed into the face. Tonight wasn't the first time the edge of it had found her skin. The evening had started the way most of Grant Pelham's evenings started, with him telling her what she was allowed to wear, how much she was allowed to eat at the reception, and which rooms she was allowed to stand in. He was one of Toronto's most celebrated architects, civic prizes, magazine covers, the kind of name that opened any door in the financial district. His firm had just broken ground on a mixed-use tower in the Junction, and the developer's gala at the Shangri-La had been his moment to perform. Robyn was part of the performance. She had known that for most of their 4-year marriage. She had simply stopped knowing how to leave. "Do you understand how you looked standing next to Hargreaves's wife tonight?" he had said in the car, his voice soft the way a knife is soft before it goes in. "She's a runner. She takes care of herself. And you're standing there like—" He made a sound she recognized, a sound that landed somewhere between contempt and exhaustion. "Like you, God, Robyn, like you." She had turned toward the window. That was the mistake. He hated it when she retreated. The blow came fast, and then the door, and then the cold. Now she was on the ground, counting the things that hurt, which was almost everything. The sound of the engines reached her before the headlights did. Not one vehicle, 3, low and synchronized, the kind of idol that belonged to something armored and expensive. They came around the south end of the lane in a tight convoy. 2 black SUVs flanking a long, dark Escalade that looked like it had been built for people who didn't worry about parallel parking. Car doors opened, footsteps quick and organized. "Boss," a man's voice, gravel and urgency, "there's someone down." The second voice came from farther back and moved closer as it spoke, unhurried in a way that didn't match the situation. "Conscious?" "Barely." Robyn tried to push herself upright, and couldn't. Her left wrist buckled under the weight. She heard herself make a sound that was not quite a word. "Eyes open, that's something." The second voice was directly above her now. She forced her gaze up. The man crouching over her wore a black overcoat that the rain seemed to slide off, unwilling to touch him. His face was angular and careful, the kind of face that had decided a long time ago not to give anything away for free. Dark hair, rain-wet. Eyes the color of weathered granite, fixed on her with an attention that felt almost scientific. Not cold, exactly, but precise. She knew from the way his men arranged themselves around him, the way they watched the perimeter rather than her, that he was the kind of person who had people to do the worrying for him. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked. "Robyn." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Robyn Teal." "Where are you hurt, Robyn?" "Wrist, face, ribs, maybe." She swallowed. He pushed me out of the car. It was still moving. Something shifted in the man's expression, not softness, but a tightening, like a decision being made. "Boss, we have the package in the vehicle," one of the men said behind him. "If this goes sideways—" "Call ahead to Bertolucci." He was already shrugging off his coat. "Tell him we have a medical arrival. She's going to be difficult too." "Carefully, Hale." His voice dropped just enough to end that sentence permanently. "She is not difficult. She is injured. Learn the difference." He laid the coat over her without asking, and the warmth of it was so sudden and so complete that Robyn felt something crack behind her sternum. Not a rib, but something older and more structural. She had forgotten what it felt like to have someone put something warm over her body without hesitation, without calculation, without the small, visible pause that said, "This is more of you than I expected." "I'm going to lift you," he said, meeting her eyes. "It will hurt. I need you to breathe through it and stay with me." "I don't need." Not unkind, just a fact. He slid one arm beneath her knees and the other behind her back, and she braced herself for what always came next. The grunt, the visible effort, the commentary, spoken or unsaid, about what it meant to carry a woman her size. Grant had once refused to help her with a suitcase at Pearson Airport because, he said, she had overpacked, when everyone in that terminal knew the suitcase had nothing to do with it. The man lifted her without any of that. He simply stood, and she was against his chest, and he was already moving toward the escalade. She didn't know his name yet. She would know it within the hour, and it would terrify her. But in those first few minutes, moving through the cold rain in the arms of a stranger who held her like she weighed exactly as much as she should, Robyn Teal felt something she hadn't felt in 4 years, the specific, devastating relief of being handled with care. The private clinic was 2 floors below a dental practice in Rosedale, the kind of address that didn't exist officially, staffed by a physician named Dr. Bertolucci, who had the tired eyes of a man who had stopped being surprised by anything. He set her wrist, bound her ribs, confirmed the concussion, and told her in a voice stripped of any judgment that she would need to rest for several days. She slept for most of 2 of them. When she came fully back to herself, the room around her was unfamiliar in the way of places that cost a great deal of money. Clean lines, expensive linen, a silence that had been deliberately purchased. Her wrist was in a brace, her face ached in a precise pattern that matched the shape of Grant Pelham's ring. The man from the alley was sitting in a chair by the window, jacket on, watching the street below with the patience of someone who had learned to wait for things. "Robyn Teal," he said without turning, "urban planner. City of Toronto contract consultant, currently seconded to the Lakeside Revitalization Portfolio, married 4 years to Grant Pelham, principal of Pelham Architecture Group." He turned then. "He filed a missing persons report yesterday morning. Very concerned husband." There were photographs of him outside the 52 division, looking worried. Robyn sat up slowly. "Who are you?" "Leon Strauss." The name didn't hit her the way a name from a news article would. It hit her the way certain smells hit you, direct, beneath the thinking part of the brain, in the part that knew things before you did. Leon Strauss was not news. He was a rumor that had been running through Toronto's development and finance sectors for the better part of a decade. The kind of name that appeared in the space between what was said in boardrooms and what was documented. The kind of man who didn't sit across from you unless something was already in motion. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked. He leaned forward in the chair, forearms on his knees. He had a stillness about him that wasn't passivity. It was containment, like something that had chosen, very deliberately, not to move. "Your husband has a problem," Leon said. "That has recently become my problem. Grant Pelham borrowed $40 million over 18 months from a trafficking organization operating out of Montreal and Hamilton. He's been washing it through construction cost overruns on the Junction Tower and 2 other municipal projects. False invoicing, inflated subcontracting, shell consultancies." He paused. "All of those consultancies are registered under your professional credentials." Robyn went very still. "He didn't tell you," Leon said. "It wasn't a question." "No." Her voice was flat. "He told me I needed to sign some administrative paperwork. He said it was standard for spousal disclosure on municipal contracts." She closed her eyes for a moment. "I signed them. 11 of them. Over 14 months. Leon's jaw tightened, but the anger in it was not aimed at her. "He's been building a paper trail that leads directly to you. If the CIA or the RCMP ever started pulling threads, they'd find your name on every entity. He'd be a witness. You'd be the architect of the whole thing. He was going to let me take the fall. He was going to ensure it. Leon reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and placed a photograph on the bedside table. It was a surveillance image. Grant and a woman Robyn had never seen, dark-haired and angular, leaving a hotel on King Street West. Her name is Simone Frechette. She's a tax attorney. She helped structure the shell companies. Robyn looked at the photograph for a long moment. "You said this became your problem," she said. "Why?" "Because Grant Pelham got greedy. He's been skimming from the laundering operation, pocketing the spread between what the Montreal group thinks he's moving and what he's actually moving. They've started to notice the discrepancy. When they find out he's been stealing from them while keeping physical evidence of the whole operation in a self-storage unit on Queen Street East, they will remove him and every liability attached to him." He looked at her steadily. "That includes you, whether you knew anything or not. So you need me alive for?" "I need Grant Pelham stopped, and you are the only person in his life who knows how he actually operates." He held her gaze. "He made you invisible. He used you as a shield and assumed you were too small, in his estimation, to ever become a threat. That was his single greatest miscalculation." Robyn looked down at her braced wrist, the ache in her ribs, the knowledge settling in, layer by layer, that the man she had shared a bed with for 4 years had not simply been cruel. He had been criminal. He had been building a trap with her name on it, while she signed the documents he slid across the kitchen table. She thought of every meeting she had been excluded from. Every time he had said, "Leave the business side to me, you focus on what you're good at." Every time she had felt grateful, as if being kept out of her own professional destruction was a kindness he was doing her. "Tell me what you need," she said. Leon almost smiled. It was a small thing, partial, quickly recovered, but she caught it. "Everything you can remember, passwords, routines, where he keeps physical records, what he does on Tuesday afternoons." She thought about Tuesday afternoons. Grant left the office at 2 and claimed he had a standing physiotherapy appointment on St. Clair. He always came home with no particular smell, no muscle rub, no gym bag, just a tension that had been released somewhere else. "He goes to a self-storage facility," she said slowly. "I found a key once in the pocket of his running jacket. He said it was from the cottage, but the tag had a unit number and a Queen Street East address." She met Leon's eyes. "The kind of address you don't put near your name." Leon was already reaching for his phone. They gave her 3 days in the clinic and then moved her to a house in the beaches. Quiet, detached, surrounded by the kind of old trees that made surveillance difficult. Leon's people brought her a laptop, her own documents pulled from Grant's home server, before he thought to change the access credentials, and a woman named Hale, who turned out to be the same person who had spoken in the alley, and who, in daylight, was compact and watchful, and possessed of a very dry sense of humor. Robyn worked. She worked the way she had always worked, systematically, cross-referencing, pulling the logical threads. Only now, instead of municipal zoning files, she was pulling apart 4 years of her own financial victimization and reconstructing it into something that could be used. She found the storage unit records through an address linked to one of Grant's shell consultancies. She identified the access pattern. Tuesday afternoons, always cash. Unit 114, 14 months of rental fees. The physical ledgers, actual paper, she was almost certain, because Grant didn't trust digital records, and had said so once, drunk in an unguarded moment she hadn't understood at the time, would be there. Leon stood at the kitchen table on the 4th evening and watched her map it out on the whiteboard they'd set up near the window. He was quiet in the way of someone who was genuinely paying attention, not performing patience. "He always said I was bad with numbers," Robyn said, capping the marker. "Told me his business was too complex for me to follow, that I should stick to public consultation and let him handle the finances." She didn't look away from the board. I have a master's degree in urban economics. I have 2 published papers on municipal infrastructure investment. I did the statistical modeling on the original lakeside proposal that got the whole project funded. She turned. I let him convince me I was bad with numbers. Leon moved to the board, reading the matrix she had built. Shell company names, access dates, transaction flows, parallel entities. He was quiet for a moment. He told you that because he needed you to stay confused, Leon said. Confusion is how you keep someone in a place that benefits you. He turned to face her, and his expression held something she would not have expected from a man like this, a clean, uncomplicated fury on her behalf. He saw exactly what you were and built a cage size to fit it. That's not failure on your part. That's premeditation on his. Robyn held that for a moment. I need to get into the storage unit, she said. I know. Grant still has the key, but I remember the unit number, and the facility uses an alphanumeric PIN that he set up under our home postal code. He told me once, so I'd have it in an emergency. She picked up a printed page from the table. I'm the registered account holder, my name, my credit card in the first month. I found the statements. I have legal access to that unit. You don't. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, Tuesday after 2 before 4, I'll have eyes on every approach. She nodded. And then, because it needed to be said, whatever's in there, I get to decide what we do with it. Leon tilted his head slightly, agreed. The storage facility on Queen Street East smelled of industrial cleaner and old cardboard. Robyn wore a wool coat in deep plum and low boots, her hair up, her posture exact. 2 of Leon's people flanked her in the elevator, dressed as nothing in particular. Unit 114 was at the end of a corridor with no working cameras. Grant had chosen it carefully. Robyn entered the PIN, the lock released. Inside, shelving, archive boxes, an old drafting cabinet from Grant's early practice days. She went to the drafting cabinet first, bottom drawer, behind a rolled set of blueprints for a project that had never been built. 3 brown accordion folders, each fastened with a red elastic band. She opened the first one at the small table by the door. Handwritten ledgers, Grant's architectural notation, clean, precise, a specific shorthand he used for cost estimations, applied to transaction records, money in, money shifted, money labeled as something it wasn't. 42 months of it, clearly cross-referenced, nearly impossible to misread. She was halfway through the second folder when she found the insurance documents. They had been filed neatly behind the ledgers as if they were merely administrative, a life insurance policy underwritten through an offshore intermediary with a Cayman Islands mailing address. The insured, Robyn Teal Pelham. The value $11 million. The beneficiary, Grant Pelham, sole. The policy had been finalized on a date Robyn recognized without having to calculate. It was the same week Grant had come home and told her, warmly, that he'd sorted out some tax planning paperwork and she should sign a few forms before dinner. It was nothing. Just housekeeping. She had signed. She always signed. Clipped to the policy was a second document, an assessment from a private psychiatrist she had never met, dated 8 weeks ago, describing her as exhibiting erratic behavior consistent with a depressive and dissociative disorder. It cited 3 incidents. 2 of them had been fabricated entirely. The third was a dinner party where she had become quiet after Grant spent 40 minutes disparaging her in front of guests, and she had excused herself to the washroom because she needed to not cry in front of his colleagues. And apparently this had been recorded as a dissociative episode. The psychiatrist's report was signed, dated, and notarized. He had been building a case, not just for the insurance money, for a narrative, unstable wife, financial pressures. A woman who had been documented officially as fragile. A fall, a car door opened on a moving vehicle. It would read very differently with that paperwork already on file. The night in the Distillery District had not been rage. It had been the plan. Robyn sat in the storage unit for a long time. One of Leon's people appeared in the doorway once. She held up a hand and they withdrew. Then she put the folders in her bag, turned off the light, and walked out. Leon was waiting in the escalade. He read her face before she said anything and handed her a bottle of water without comment. She told him what she'd found. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he took the psychiatrist's report, read it once, and set it down on the seat between them. He built a story, Leon said. His voice was very quiet, to make the ending look like something it wasn't. Yes, Robyn. He turned to look at her directly, and the controlled fury she'd glimpsed before was closer to the surface now. He priced your life at $11 million. He manufactured your instability to support the narrative. And then he tried to collect on it with a car door on a November night. He paused. I need you to understand what you're sitting on right now. I know what I'm sitting on. Do you also understand what those ledgers mean for the people in Montreal who have been watching their margins shrink? His voice was even. When they learn that Grant has been skimming their money and documenting it in his own handwriting, they will not send a letter. She met his gaze. Good. There is a choice in front of us, he said. We hand this to the RCMP Financial Crimes Unit tonight, and Grant spends a decade in legal proceedings while his lawyers find angles. Or we expose it where it will damage him most, publicly, irrevocably, in front of everyone whose opinion he has ever leveraged, and then we let the people he stole from handle the rest. Robyn thought of Grant's calendar. The Ontario Architecture and Design Awards ceremony, the industry's highest recognition, was 2 weeks out, a gala at the Fairmont Royal York. Grant was a nominated finalist. He had been practicing his acceptance speech in his home office. She had heard it through the wall more than once, the cadence of false humility he had perfected. I know exactly where he'll be, she said, and exactly who'll be watching. The Fairmont's grand ballroom was everything the occasion demanded. Amber chandeliers, linen-covered tables, the assembled hum of an entire industry that had made Grant Pelham's name into a credential. 2 trade publications had cameras along the east wall. A Design Network's documentary crew was set up near the stage. The mayor's chief of staff was in the 3rd row. Half the real estate development community of Toronto had paid $400 a plate to be seen being present. Grant Pelham stood near the bar with the comfortable posture of a man who had arranged in advance for the evening to go well. He held his drink with loose, practiced ease. Beside him, close enough for intention but distant enough for plausibility, stood Simone Frechette in a black column dress, pretending to be a colleague attending for professional reasons. The program was 15 minutes from beginning. The main doors opened. There was a moment, it lasted perhaps 4 seconds, where the room processed what it was seeing before any individual in it could articulate what had changed. The sound didn't stop all at once. It tapered, the way sound does when something more interesting replaces it. Robyn Teal walked into the grand ballroom of the Fairmont Royal York in a dress the color of garnet, deep red velvet, structured to hold every curve of her body without apology. A local designer she had championed in a public space consultation 2 years ago had made it in 3 days. It fit exactly as she was. Not adjusted for, not worked around. Made for her specifically as she actually existed in the world. She had not covered the faint yellow remnant of the bruise on her cheekbone. Everyone in the room could see what it was if they chose to look. Leon Strauss walked half a step behind her, and the 4 people accompanying them looked like nothing remarkable until you considered how they had arranged themselves. Grant's glass stopped midway to his mouth. Grant. Her voice carried in the way that voices carry when a room has gone quiet for them. She stopped 10 feet from him, and the cameras that had been pointed at the podium swung toward her without being directed. You look well, considering. Robyn. His voice had gone thin at the edges. What are you? You need to leave. You are not. I'm a registered guest, she said. My firm is a sponsoring organization of this event. I've attended every year for 6 years. She tilted her head. You registered me yourself 3 months ago. You might want to check your details before you finish that sentence. Simone Frechette took a step backward. "This woman is having an episode," Grant said, raising his voice, addressing the room rather than Robyn. "She has a documented history of, 'I need someone from security over here.'" "The psychiatric report was fabricated," Robyn said clearly, in a voice that reached every corner of the ballroom. "The physician listed has no record of ever meeting me. His license number traces to a numbered Ontario corporation registered to the same postal code as your storage unit on Queen Street East." She opened her clutch and removed a USB drive. "Unit 114, the one with 34 months of handwritten ledgers documenting your arrangement with the organization you've been laundering money through, and the $11 million insurance policy you took out on my life." She looked at the AV technician near the projection screen. He had been staring for 30 seconds and moved immediately. "There's a folder on that drive. Could you bring up the first file?" The projection screen, which had been displaying the award ceremony logo, flickered. The ballroom took a collective breath as the first image appeared. Grant's own handwriting, scanned in high resolution from the accordion folders, with 3 columns of figures that required no interpretation from anyone who had ever read a financial document. "The insurance policy is the second file," Robyn continued. "The fabricated psychiatric assessment he commissioned to support an accidental death narrative is the third." Grant lunged. He crossed the distance in 3 steps, arm extended, and Robyn did not move. He didn't reach her. Hale stepped from behind Robyn's left shoulder, caught Grant's wrist in a grip that made his knees buckle, and had him against the nearest pillar in a single fluid motion. A second person materialized on Grant's other side. Both of them were entirely calm about it. Leon moved to stand beside Robyn. He did not touch her, but his presence was specific, deliberate, positioned, unmistakable to everyone in the room. 2 uniformed officers came through the side entrance with a plainclothes officer between them. Robyn had made that call 48 hours prior, through an RCMP financial crimes contact she had cultivated during the Lakeside portfolio work. They had been very interested in the handwritten ledgers. Grant Pelham left the grand ballroom in a way that was not dignified. Simone Frechette was 2 steps from the service exit when Hale looked at her once. She stopped. Robyn stood in the ballroom and watched Grant Pelham's carefully arranged evening come apart around him. She watched the cameras follow him rather than the podium. She watched the mayor's chief of staff make a phone call in the corridor without sitting back down. She watched the chair of the awards committee lean toward the executive director and say something quietly that required no translation. Then she turned around and faced the room, all of it, the eyes and the cameras and the industry that had watched her be diminished for 4 years. And she stood in it exactly as she was, large and whole and present, the bruise still visible on her cheekbone, the garnet dress holding every part of her without compromise. "I spent 4 years letting someone convince me I was too much," she said, not to anyone in particular, to everyone. "Too big, too visible, too much space." She was quiet for a moment, looking at the room that had hosted his performances. He was wrong about the space. I was always supposed to be in it. She walked to where Leon was standing by the doors. They left the grand ballroom together, stepping out into the November night where the air had gone clean and cold, and tasted of nothing that had already hurt her. On the street, Toronto moved around them the way it always moved, enormous and indifferent and fully alive with its own business. Leon held the car door. "Where to?" he asked. Robyn looked up at the lit towers of the financial district. The skyline her professional life had been spent shaping in small, real, undocumented ways. She thought of the Lakeside proposal, the statistical models, the 11 consultant registrations signed in her name for projects she had never touched, the 4 years of being told she couldn't understand the numbers. "Somewhere that isn't his," she said. Leon looked at her for a moment, with that precise, ungiving attention that she had come to understand was the closest he came to showing something plainly. "I know a place," he said. She got in. The city slid past the window in long ribbons of light, and Robyn Teal sat in the warmth of it and let herself take up exactly as much space as she occupied. No adjustment, no apology, no smaller version of herself offered up in the hope that a smaller version would finally be enough. She had survived the cobblestones. She had walked back in through the front door. Whatever came next, she would meet it as the only thing she had ever actually been, a woman who could not be made small enough to disappear.